Hey everybody, it's springtime and it's in April, and so we want to talk about spring cleaning your body and the detox. Everyone's getting on board with spring cleaning and detox, so we're jumping on board. And so I've got Tyler Pennypacker with me. He's one of our nutritionists at Root Causes, and I'm Philip Ube, medical doctor. And so Tyler is going to be talking to us about toxin avoidance. One of the main things we heavily preach when a patient first joins our practice is but detox is such a buzzword that people want to detox, they're ready to detox, but what most of them don't realize is they have more toxins coming in than you could ever detoxify. So one of the first things we focus on is stopping the retox before we get into detox. So Tyler's going to talk to us about some of our common toxin exposures and what we can do to avoid them, because avoiding them is the same thing as detoxifying. So I've got my coffee. Go ahead.
Excellent. So one of our main steps in treatment timeline is to avoid toxins. And we know that prevention is one of the best forms of medicine. And in medicine, we have a phrase that says, first do no harm. And we can do that by choosing clean food. Of course, there are many ways to prevent toxic exposure, but food is one of the best. And the reason is because that is a form of consistent exposure. Okay, so what exactly is clean food? Clean food is real food. I think most of us know that not choosing processed foods, fast foods, packaged foods
So
is
Doritos don't grow in nature? The little triangular, they
exactly,
don't?
yes, yes. No, that's not real food.
That's not real.
Which leads me to wanting to define what is real food. So this is
Mhm.
my working definition of that. And real food is anything found in nature that has been touched by the sun and water. So
Mhm.
it's a very good way to look at food and ask yourself,
I
was
like that.
this grown in the ground? Was it touched by the sun? Was water used to grow it?
So
Uh,
I'm food, is what you're saying.
I mean, to some people,
To a lion, I'm real food.
yes,
Okay, got it.
yes. And real food comes in all shapes and sizes. It's animal proteins and fats, dairies, grains, legumes, vegetables, fruits, and so forth. Unfortunately, in this day and age, real food is not always clean food.
Yeah, it's true.
No. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about how to choose real food.
Absolutely. You've got my slide open
Okay.
instead of yours, but one of the other ways I always like to describe real food is, and I don't know that this fits all definitions, but if you can get a food wet, it's
Hmm.
generally a real food. Meaning, if you dunk a Dorito in water, it becomes really gross,
Hmm.
right? If you dunk an apple in water, you can still eat it. If you dunk an egg in water, you can still eat it. But processed foods, bread, if you dunked bread in the water, you're not going to eat it.
Hmm.
So that's another easy way to distinguish, is my food processed or not? Because if it's not processed, chances are you can dunk it in water and eat it, right? And some of the vegetables and things we even eat are intentionally in water,
Hmm.
called soups, right?
Right, right, right. So bringing us to our next point is how to find clean food. So the first group I really want to focus on is produce. So conventional produce is such a reservoir of toxins nowadays. And that's why we want to opt for organic as much as possible. The USDA organic label, the requirements for it to be considered organic, I believe it has to be grown in soil with no synthetic fertilizers and pesticides for at least 3 years prior to harvest. And luckily, we have a great group called the Environmental Working Group that
EWG.
has created a shopper's guide every year with 46 of the most common fruits and vegetables and their ratings as far as how often they've been sprayed.
Before you jump into that, I want you to focus a little more on the idea. I mean, I came from a background where we didn't eat organic food.
Mhm.
We thought it was just expensive food, right? And why should something have to be raised organically? And the government and whatever commercial things at bay have suppressed the fact
Mhm.
that food can actually be toxic for you. And so, how do the pesticides? Where are the pesticides in the produce? Are they just on the outside? Are they inside?
It's a great question. I think it's both.
It
I
is.
think on the flesh, or in the flesh itself, but on the skin. So, cleaning only goes so far.
Agreed. That was the exact point I wanted you to make was, guys, if you're buying non-organic vegetables, produce, whatever, please wash it. That's at least a step.
Hmm.
But you have to know that they've been spraying those pesticides on those pesticides, whatever it may be, on those plants. Those plants soak it in
Right.
from the soil in addition to on their leaves and their fruit.
Exactly. And when we think of root causes, it really begins in the soil, and our
Oh, it's
soils
so
are
true.
unfortunately so deficient.
So true. And so in that same organic farming is there's a lot of negative press in organic farming. Organic farming is not where it needs to be in
Mhm.
America. It needs to be better, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Just because
Mhm.
there's a GMO crop right next to it, and they're spraying glyphosate right next to your organic farm, and the organic farm's getting some glyphosate.
Mhm.
There's only so much we can do in this world
Right.
until everyone's an organic farmer. That's just where it needs to head. So don't demonize all food just because it's not perfect, or you read an
Mhm.
article that said this organic food had this much glyphosate. They're doing the best they can. And let's face it, our regulations need a step up to make sure they're
Mhm.
actually monitoring what these organic farmers are claiming, and that we're not just paying more for the same
Mhm.
thing.
Right. Right.
It's a little bit of a tangent.
Yeah. No, good. So on that note, let's just take a look. Let's just take a look at the two lists here. So the Environmental Working Group creates what's called a Dirty Dozen list. These foods don't change much from year to
They
year,
don't.
and you're going to notice some trends between these Dirty Dozens and the Clean 15. So right here we see things like strawberries, berries, a lot of the cruciferous leafy vegetables, mustard greens, collard greens. These foods aren't protected by hard outer skin and such that we'll see in the Clean 15.
And that's always a surprise because you always see corn in the clean 15 and you're like, corn is like one of the most GMO crops possible, but how is it in the clean 15? And so
Mhm.
that's the key. I normally tell patients and my family, if you're going to eat the skin or the outside or the entirety of a plant, in general you got to buy it organic because
Mhm.
it had no shell to peel off in order to hide it. So like an orange has a peel that you would peel
Mhm.
off. Most people don't eat that. Whereas an apple, you're going to eat the skin. Now, my mom took that up a notch, and I caught her buying non organic fruit. If you're watching this, Mom, she bought non organic apples, and I called her on it. She goes, "Oh, but I peel the skin off because you said not to eat the skin."
I mean that is a strategy,
She
no.
manipulated the system.
Right,
Good job, Mom.
right. Um,
So strawberries are always, and we're coming up on strawberry season,
mhm.
so that's a big one. Strawberries are like one of the most toxic laden foods that you can create and you can get in America. I don't know if you've ever seen a strawberry farm. I haven't seen enough, but they take the rows and they're just covered in plastic.
Right.
Literally, the whole field is nearly plastic, and then just the little bitty strawberry plant
Mhm.
sticking out of it. And apparently, the reason why is so they can soak the plants in the pesticides or
Mm.
whatnot, so it doesn't necessarily get into the soil, but
Mhm.
the plant is the only thing exposed, and that's apparently why they're not only because they don't have a shell that you peel off,
Right.
but because they're heavily soaked in it,
Mm.
and they're very spongy. So I imagine that's probably another reason. Like an apple, you could dunk it in water, and
Right.
then water comes off. Strawberry's kind of spongy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just made that up. What's next?
So moving on, so we have our Clean 15. So these are foods that, if you can, if finances and accessibility allow, buy organic. But these are ones you can compromise a little bit on, and that again is because
Mhm.
of the protective skin that they have around. So you have things like pineapple, avocado, as Dr. Oob said, corn. I'll be quite honest, I very much dislike organic avocados. They just have a weird taste to me, and I
Really?
I will always
You
buy
get the non-organic.
conventional.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
do that taste test.
yeah.
Interesting. So these lists that he's talking about are public. EWG is an organization.
Mhm.
It's not a company. Or I guess it's a company, but what am I trying to say? It's tax exempt or whatever. It's a kind of volunteer thing.
Right.
And so this list is made public every year. You just Google Dirty Dozen. They even have their own app. I think it's called Dirty Dozen. On the
Mhm.
Dirty Dozen app, it's got the Dirty Dozen list and the Clean 15. We've got the handout of what it looks like, and we can make that available. It's EWG's. It's not ours. And so that's such an easy way to make a huge impact on your kitchen with as little financial burden as possible. We always say buy as much organic as you can
Mhm.
afford, but the Clean 15 is the one to say, all right, if we're gonna not if there are certain things we're gonna buy non-organic,
Mhm.
that's the list to go for. And just a reminder, the Dirty Dozen is the list to absolutely don't buy non-organic.
Right.
Now, with the caveat of we would much rather you eat strawberries that are non-organic than Doritos, because I'm picking on
Mhm.
Doritos right now, but whatever processed food, a non-organic produce is always
Yes.
healthier than a
Yes.
processed food.
100%. I couldn't agree more with that.
I think in functional medicine, in general, and holistic medicine, we focus too much on people being perfect. So many
Hmm.
times of, oh, don't eat cooked tomatoes because it has this, or take the skin off,
Hmm.
and it just makes food so complex. I like Tyler's mentality of eat real food, sometimes cook it, sometimes raw,
Hmm.
buy organic when possible, keep it simple, and don't demonize food just because it wasn't perfect, right?
Right.
Like one of the ideas of chopping the broccoli 40 minutes
Hmm.
before you actually cook it releases more sulforaphanes. That's great and all, but I'm hungry when I
Yeah.
get home. I don't want to wait 40 minutes to cook the broccoli. So don't think that if you eat it immediately that you're not getting the benefit.
Hmm. Very good.
Good. Any other points you want to make on that?
I think we wrapped up on produce. So I
Okay,
want to
good.
talk about animal products a little bit.
All right, so our next topic is going to be on animal products. So stay tuned.